Hello and welcome to South First. I'm Anusha Ravisood and you're watching State of Play, our daily roundup of all things politics, policy, and human interest. Kerala's government is excited about its all new, revamped, very delicious sounding dishes on the midday meal menu, with the likes of biryani, pulao, fried rice, inclusion of microgreens, pulses, a variety of food that promises to be nutritious. The Kerala government is pretty proud of its revamped menu. There is, however, just one concern. All the rice dishes are likely to be prepared with fortified rice. Now, this has become a major cause of concern for not just food rights activists, health experts, wellness experts, but primarily tribal communities in Kerala and districts that house predominantly tribal communities. Now, one may ask, what is the problem with fortified rice? In fact, if anything, the entire intent or the stated intent of introducing fortified rice to sections of citizens, especially as a push that comes from the union government. The union government, under the Narendra Modi leadership, has been pushing for consumption of fortified rice to address concerns like anemia, malnutrition, etc. In fact, several experts argue that rice fortified with micronutrients such as iron, folic acid, and vitamin B12 is extremely important to address concerns of anemia, especially among women, lactating mothers, pregnant women, and girl children. But two things to remember in this entire scenario. In a country like India, when we talk about malnutrition, we are definitely not talking about lack of food or lack of enough grains. Our public distribution system, thanks to the Food Security Act that was enacted by the previous UPA regime and the incumbent NDA regime that is continuing the free grains supply system, food like rice, wheat, primary pulses, and cereals are something that are distributed through the PDS system. So our diet is extremely carbohydrate dense, micronutrients that are extremely essential to ensure a very healthy, full lifestyle. With vegetables, fruits, and micronutrient dense food extremely rare, to be honest, also expensive for any average Indian from a poor and not so well to do household to even afford. Micronutrient, the lack of micronutrients in food is what is leading to issues, concerns, health and wellness issues like anemia, in especially in children in vulnerable groups in India. The lack of micronutrients is primarily the cause of malnutrition in India that is leading to concerns like stunted growth as well. To address all of these concerns, the governments have come up with the concept of fortified rice to fortify rice with micronutrients like folic acid, like vitamin B12, like iron. The problem with fortified rice, however, is that it can be detrimental to the health and wellness of sections of citizens, especially those from communities that report higher prevalence, that report more number of cases of thalassemia and sickle cell anemia. The iron fortified rice leads to deterioration of health of these communities or children, women, men from these communities. Way back in 2022, Kerala's Wayanad, another district that is known for its tribal population, was chosen as an aspirational district where fortified rice would be distributed to the PDS system. Even then, there was a lot of pushback against this move, considering that this rice, according to FDA, should not be consumed or should be consumed only under doctor's prescription, depending on the kind of condition that the person consuming this fortified rice has. For example, the Food Safety and Standards Fortification of Food Regulations 2018 states that those suffering from sickle cell anemia should not consume iron fortified food, and those suffering from thalassemia should consume it only under medical advice. Now, this being the situation, Kerala has now decided to include fortified rice as part of its midday meal to all children across the state, and this is a matter of concern. The scientific community, the health and wellness community, has raised red flags about, or rather against, fortified rice and distributing it in a mass level without understanding the requirement of each section, different groups in the society. It is the union government's stated policy that by 2024 they want to feed micronutrient fortified rice to half of India's population, or rather over half of India's population. And now the CPIM led government in Kerala is mirroring this policy of the BJP led NDA government at the center, despite opposition from its own people's rights groups. Now, the big concern that is being raised about fortified food or fortified rice being made part of midday meals is that the children then don't have a choice on whether they want to consume it or not. Even under the PDS system, especially in Wayanad, there are a lot of activists. In fact, my colleague Sri Lakshmi Soman has done an entire story on fortified rice being distributed in Wayanad through the PDS system, where people who buy the rice or take the rice from PDS system actually separate the fortified rice kernels from natural organic rice. In fact, the difference is so stark that people refer to fortified rice kernels as plastic rice. That is the kind of fear, that is the kind of lack of awareness, or that is the kind of concern that is persistent in tribal populated districts in Kerala. So, according to the FSSAI's demand or mandate, there used to be a warning on fortified rice packs or fortified rice distribution system, where it would say that people with sickle cell anemia and thalassemia should stay away from this rice. Now that warning is no longer given. That means people who are consuming fortified rice do not know whether they should be careful about it given their condition. Food rights activists insist, especially those working in tribal areas, insist that this lack of or removing of the caution, this lack of transparency and information puts the rights of vulnerable groups at risk. While there is no doubt that fortified rice that is packed with micronutrients, redone with micronutrients, repacked with micronutrients, is scientifically proven to be cost effective, scalable, and sustainable, concerns have been raised about how it is not suitable for all people in all sections of the society. Food rights activists have raised concerns about how this caution that used to accompany fortified rice kernels before has been removed without public consultations, which means people who are consuming it do not know whether they should be consuming it at all in the first place. The lack of clarity on the range of iron mixing in these fortified foods is also something that several activists have pointed to. In fact, one Niti Aayog assessment had revealed very serious lapses in quality control, such as non uniform blending of fortified kernels, causing dangerous variations in iron content. Now, sickle cell anemia and thalassemia are matters of concern. Why? Because on an annual basis, on a yearly basis, about 1.5 to 2 lakh children in India are born with these two conditions. So much so that state governments and union governments have taken up initiatives not just to identify patients with sickle cell anemia and thalassemia, but also to treat these conditions, make them manageable. In Kerala, where several districts have tribal communities because these two conditions are prevalent among tribal communities, the state government has set up screening camps in several places like Nilambur, Attapadi, Kannur, Kasargod, Idukki. Now, despite the concern of tribal communities, the Kerala government's decision to go ahead and include fortified rice as part of its midday meal scheme definitely has ruffled a lot of feathers, raising several questions. Take, for example, Wayanad district alone. Kerala's own assessment says that there are about 1,200 sickle cell anemia patients, most of them hailing from the Sultan Batteri taluk. Now, what happens to children from these families who go to school and are forced to consume midday meals that are packed with fortified rice kernels? Activists now insist that as far as the union government is concerned, it should continue to have warning labels on fortified rice that is distributed to the PDS system so that people who are consuming it know what precautions they need to take. As far as the Kerala government's decision is concerned, perhaps the government will do well to understand, since it already knows, it already has information about places that primarily, predominantly have tribal communities within which there is prevalence of these two conditions. Maybe policy decisions need to be taken to ensure that it doesn't move ahead with a one size fits all kind of a push. Instead, address concerns that are specific to different communities at the community level, at the grassroots level. While it is commendable what the Kerala government wants to do by introducing not just nutritious, but also food that excites children, encourages them to be part of the schooling system, even if it is just for the midday meals. What the government needs to also take into consideration is that its decision, a one size fits all decision, may end up hampering or impacting adversely the health and wellness of children from vulnerable communities. The job of the government at the end of it is to protect health, wellness of its citizens, and children are the future of the state, and more effort needs to be made to ensure that whatever decision, whatever policy decisions the government is taking will only contribute positively and not impact adversely. Until I come back to you with yet another episode of State of Play, do stay tuned to South First. Thank you so much for watching.